a year 2017 was, and we cannot start 2018 without a look at how last year ended on a political crescendo. I was there during the 4 days of bloodletting and political scheming as comrades became adversaries. The upshot was the build-up to this moment.
As things stand, comrades, we have two candidates for the position of president, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa and Comrade Dlamini-Zuma. The distribution of votes is as follows. Comrade Dlamini-Zuma received 2261 votes and Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa received 2440 votes.
This was the moment Cyril Ramaphosa made it. For nearly 30 years, Ramaphosa was the nearly man of South African politics. At last, he is on the cusp of political power. He defeated his challenger, former minister and former head of the African Union, Dr. Dlamini-Zuma, in a race so close it went down to the wire. What it means is Ramaphosa is now president of the African National Congress and president-elect of the country, but far from plain sailing with the top six leadership of the ANC divided down the middle. On the one side is Ramaphosa, Paul Mashatile and Gwede Mantashe. On the other side are the three Dlamini-Zuma supporters, namely Ace Magashule, Jesse Duarte and David Mabuza. So what kind of presidency will Ramaphosa have, and is he the silver bullet for the South African economy? Political analyst Professor Richard Cullen was also at Nasrec and gave me his views.
It's interesting to make reference and to start this conversation with Moody's because the international investment community has been waiting for this almost as long and as with bated breath as all of us and the ANC itself. You know, they really wanted change. There's a lot of investors who trust this country, who want to get back into this country, who see opportunity here, but the political risk has just been too great. And Jacob Zuma's project of state capture and so on has held them back, understandably. Therefore, Ramaphosa is an opportunity. The question now, of course, they're asking is the one you've put to me, which is, will there be a drag factor on him? Will he be constrained? I think he has waited a long time for this moment. I think he intends to use power decisively. He has the dual advantage of being the president of the ANC and the deputy president of the country. He has to make maximum use of that. And lastly, I think the Premier League guys who have had a big victory, Zuma faction, call them that if you wish. Yes, they've had a big victory in this electoral conference, but they're not that interested in policy. They're interested in power. And so I think they will give him a relatively free hand to push forward through the economic policy reforms and the consensus building that's necessary.
You yourself think that he might be in for a bit of resistance. I mean, you said that the next 18 months could be, he could spend more of his political capital trying to contain the Premier League faction, the Zuma faction, than actually implementing policy. Could he be, could he end up having a hung jury, and could that hamstring his implementation process?
Well, clearly it would have been better for him to have had a winner-takes-all scenario where he and his team and his slate had a clean sweep. But he's a realist and he knows that wasn't possible. Indeed, he knew, I think, early on, perhaps at the beginning of this year, that he wasn't going to win this election without the support of at least significant numbers from Mpumalanga. I think he did a deal with that. He made peace with that. The thing that's perhaps shocked everybody on Sunday night was that the second Premier League victory of Ace Magashule as Secretary General. That rattled people a bit, because then you had two very powerful and power-hungry people with a very different approach to politics and to leadership in there with him. And yes, he is going to have to manage them. But his gamble, and it is a gamble, is that he'll be able to manage them better from within than from without. Better to have them in the tent than on the outside causing trouble.
Richard, now we just touched on two important things. One is the international view of South Africa, you know, through ratings agency, and the other is the internal politics within the ANC itself. After putting that and articulating all of those things, is Ramaphosa still the silver bullet for the economy?
Look, it would be unwise to put all of the hopes on one man. he's just one man. But he has some very significant people who will be willing to ride this journey alongside him. Praveen Gordhan, for example, I'm told is part of an economic policy team that is ready to hit the ground running in the new year. And I think that he has to use January and February as significant, as decisively as possible to stamp his authority on the ANC, to offer a clear new vision for the country. So the 8th of January statement is significant not just for the ANC as it usually is, but for the country and for the international markets.
That was Professor Richard Culland, a law professor at UCT. January means new year and new beginnings. It's a special time for the ANC and, of course, myself. We are both January babies. But the 106-year-old organization is fighting to stay together and is hurting itself in the process. In this new year, an old wise head joins me to discuss his beloved African National Congress. My guest is Mavuso Msimang, who joins me now to discuss the state of the party. Mavuso Msimang, for your time, I thank you.
Karabu, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Let's start with maybe we should work our way back from the recent announcement by the president. It is something that you have advocated for, you and other veterans have advocated for. That is, one of the ways the ANC can save itself. Are you satisfied? Did he go enough?
We're extremely happy that he made the announcement. It's a year too late, but it's good that it has come. It's a little worrying when one hears about terms of reference as he talks about inquiries needing to be broadened to a period, I don't know, 1652, whatever he wants. Fact of the matter is that if he's acting on the remedial action that was proposed by Thuli Madonsela, then the terms of reference are very clear there.
But the president has never embraced anything coming from former public protector's office. Why would he embrace the terms of reference now?
It's difficult to impute a motive here, but it is indeed very surprising that a person who's really resisted and spent so much of everybody's money to stop these processes going forward suddenly feels that in the interest of wanting to stop corruption, he must set this thing up. There is speculation that he believes that if he initiates that, then he must be given more time as state president to continue managing this process. I don't know. It's unfair. I don't know why he did it. But if that was his intention, it wouldn't work.
President Zuma has always, in a sense, I found that he does not necessarily embrace the fact that he stands at the center of these allegations. Do you think he appreciates that his name is the reason why we are even instituting the State of Capture Commission?
I honestly sometimes wonder if he does understand the centrality of his role in many of these things. I remember at a certain time, some of the veterans had been given an audience by the National Executive Committee of the ANC. And as an aside, in the corridors, he said something about, well, I have accepted this Nkandla thing, but I never really did anything wrong. This was after he had publicly admitted that he was wrong. He had always intended to pay. And he said that. And one got the sense that he perhaps doesn't believe that. But that wouldn't help us. You can't have a president who would be so obtuse as not to understand that the things he does have affected this country, the economy, his party, South Africans, in all walks of life, so centrally.
You've been a member of the African National Congress. You have served your beloved movement. You've been in exile in its name. You've seen it come and go. You were in the heart of the challenges in the 60s. Has the movement been at a worse position from a leadership position? Has it been in a...
Actually, I've been with the ANC for 60 years, having joined in 1958. The ANC has had the history of 106 years. It's rich because there have been ups and there have been downs. And people have been able to deal with the downs. The problems that arose were specific to the period, also specific to personalities. Your question is, has it ever been in this situation? No, it hasn't been. Why? Because the ANC now governs a country. So any bad governance, any bad decisions, any corruption, any of those things has a direct impact on the 55 million people who live in this country. But there was in the history of the ANC a time when, in fact, a very highly regarded, highly respected person, this is Dr. Isaac, Dr. Pixley, Isaac Seme. I think during his tenure as president from 1930.
Well, he was an absent president.
Absolutely, absolutely.
He was just not there. He was not interested in that leading.
No, at least Zuma could boast that
at
he
least
holds
he was,
meetings.
yeah, he was there. He was there.
This guy hardly held any national executive meeting, so he was really a disaster from that point of view.
I think he was more interested in being a lawyer. But you see, the president now doesn't have, you know, an extramural activity. There is nothing.
Well, you really think it doesn't? He's been quite prolific. He's got more than 20 children.
Mr. Mavuso, we find ourselves at a position where the ANC, NEC will continuously, until the end of Zuma's presidency, will continuously have to tender to the issue of the two centers of power. Do they force him to resign, or do they impeach him?
A very good question. I think in the first instance, the ANC would need to adjust its program to fit more or less the program, the presidential terms of the state president. This may sound arrogant, of course, because it will lose power one day. But it's good as long as it is in power that you have as little a gap as possible between the two respective responsibilities of a president. So that would be one thing they should consider doing. Two centers of power are really disruptive. But what is to be done? ANC, as one lawyer pointed out yesterday in one of the channels, really doesn't have any legal power to recall him. But if he's not a loyal cadre of the movement, like Thabo Mbeki said he was, he might resist a recall simply on the basis that the ANC has no legal right to recall him. It would be suicidal, but then he has plunged himself into so many other suicidal things, because then the matter would be taken to Parliament for a vote, and perhaps they would put together regulations or put in place things that don't exist right now in the Constitution that would allow for an impeachment. And you can be absolutely certain that the two-thirds majority would be secured to impeach him. What that would mean for this man, who really has spent a lot of time in the struggle, would be that he would lose everything. He lives in dishonor and gets absolutely nothing that accrues to people who have been presidents of the country.
You said the ANC will lose power someday.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that day one of the days in 2019?
That will depend very much on what the new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, does. The ANC has lost a lot of credibility across the board. People must not say, because people in rural areas don't talk much about their confidence in the ANC has also diminished. You can take a poll anytime. But in urban areas, in strategic places like the metros, you know how they have just fallen like dominoes. And if you run the country but don't run the capital of your country, the political capital, if you don't run the hub of business, if you don't run the legislative capital, then you must really think twice about how much longer you will continue, because this, like it or not, this is where many of the people who make decisions, most of the people who make decisions reside.
A party on the periphery. Please join me for my second part with my fascinating guest, Mr. Mavuso Msimang, ANC veteran and the chair of Corruption Watch. Welcome back to Political Capital, our first episode of the year, and a guest to match. Mr. Mavuso Msimang, Chairperson of Corruption Watch and a lifelong member of the African National Congress, joins me to discuss his beloved movement. Dr. Mavuso, before we went to break, we were talking about the credibility of the sitting President of the Republic and the President of the ANC. How much can Zuma's lack of credibility still tarnish Ramaphosa's efforts in rebuilding the ANC?
It would be disastrous if he were to stay much longer than he should live. And really, one hopes that in East London, where the National Executive Council is meeting, they will have the wisdom, not for the sake of torturing the poor man, it's finished now, but for the sake of the ANC going forward, to ensure that he leaves office. If Zuma stays, you know, the unpredictable actions of his, like declaring that there will be free higher education. What impact does that have on a person like Cyril Ramaphosa, who is trying to build up a reputation, but also to continue with a president who has been so intimately associated with corruption as a state president at Mahlambantlou? While you say you are building the ANC, this is a contradiction in terms. The people of South Africa who entrusted so much of their confidence in the ANC are losing it. That is very obvious. Cyril Ramaphosa has to start now looking at what happens to him in 2019.
But therein lies my question. Now, for me and you, we know the difference between that ANC, which was led by Zuma, and this new ANC, which is led by Ramaphosa.
Right.
But is citizenry making the distinction?
The citizen, Cyril Ramaphosa, must make sure that the citizen, the person in the street and walking in the bush paths, understands clearly that this administration is different from the corrupt one of the past. And one of the actions that need to be taken is to influence his colleagues on the NEC to ensure that they recall the president or act very swiftly thereafter if this is not achieved. But also to really not just declare that he's against corruption, to be seen drawing up a program, an anti-corruption program, and give time frames as to when it must start and how quickly he wants it finished.
You penned a piece in December in the lead up to the 54th National Conference. You said that the ANC, it was actually titled, "Dear Delegates, elect leaders who will work hard to build an inclusive ANC." Is this the leadership that will do that?
Cyril Mr. Ramaphosa must work very hard to make it so.
But he's got David Mabuza, he's got Ace Magashule, he's got Jesse Duarte.
You know, one of the things that the ANC veterans, they were called 101, they're sometimes called that, wanted when they asked for a national consultative conference, and they asked for this 18 months ago. It was to make sure that the leadership of the ANC, one of the many things they wanted, comes through on a credible electoral process. Then you wouldn't have had this hodgepodge that has happened now, which is clearly influenced by slates, which has factions. You just don't know where to start. But Cyril's challenge is they allowed the system, he was part of the system which didn't really support us very strongly. He wasn't against us, but
do you think he takes like the middle line on a lot of things? You know, like Cyril has not quite come out of independently, if you will, in his own right. I mean, I can only remember one pivotal moment, which was the recalling of Pravin Gordhan. There he kind of told us that he was, you know, he didn't share the same views as the president.
And that was really very good. He has been criticized for being a little too mild, perhaps thinking that he was sitting in the same cage, you know, as the tigers. He should not perhaps rattle the cage. But, you know, leadership, now that he is freed of that, if that was a constraint, he has to demonstrate a resolve. Otherwise, the ANC can kiss 2019 goodbye.
Professor Richard Culland says that Ramaphosa has avenue to really implement reforms, because he says that the top six is made up of people who are interested in reform and change, and that's the Ramaphosa slate, and that the other slate is just interested in power. What's your view?
My view is that, yes, I mean, you have a hodgepodge of people in the top six, clearly. That everybody knows that. I mean, there was shock to find Cyril deputized by Didi Mabuza, and then you have...
General Secretary Ismail.
You know, as Secretary General, our esteemed delegates choose a person who has failed to actually manage his Free State ANC.
For over 2 decades.
And twice being told by the courts that...
He's never run a clean election?
But you know, he attended this last meeting not even as a voting delegate because of his failure to run the ANC there. And tell me, what else but slate thinking, factionalism, account for that man getting as many votes as he did? That is the problem that the ANC has. But that's the problem. It's a challenge for Ramaphosa. You know, and by the way, it's not as complex, in my opinion, and the opinion of other people that one talks to, as it sounds. He must do the right thing. The courts, in some unplanned manner, have actually dealt the ANC a great hand.
Forcing them to abide by the law.
Forcing them to do what needs to be done. So all Cyril Ramaphosa must do from a legal point of view, legitimacy point of view, is to ensure that the court orders, whether it's state capture, we hear now that some action has been taken, any of the orders are implemented. That will go a long way towards solving his own problems.
Ramaphosa stands at a very interesting position. He is the president of the ruling party and the deputy president of the republic. Yes. And according to the last judgment from the courts, he's supposed to appoint the National Director of Public Prosecutions. That is a big first telltale sign of the presidency of Ramaphosa. What are you expecting from such an appointment?
I really expect him to do one of the easiest assignments that can be given to a human being. We have a situation in which a person called Sean Abrams has just totally refused to act. We've got things called WikiLeaks. You've got so many crimes, crime allegations, incidents.
And the evidence to match with the Gupta leaks.
And you would have expected that he would move and initiate prosecutions, many of them. What has he done? He has sat and folded his hand. Ramaphosa must get a credible person. There are many in this country of ours who can do that.
I'm very suspect of people, especially having lived through the presidency of Jacob Zuma. I now know that functions of the states can be, used to serve your own reasons. I mean, I think he got nothing but delay from Sean Abrams. So why wouldn't Ramaphosa appoint somebody who will toe his line, as Sean Abrams is seen to have been towing the line of the president?
Because the culture of towing the line of the person who appoints you is really alien and is not necessarily what ought to be. You can appoint me DG as I was of Home Affairs.
We know.
There's no way the person who appointed me would expect me to do things that are wrong. Absolutely not.
We know with you, Mr. Mavuso, that it's, but we found people to be corruptible in this country.
No, that is the case. I think one of the things that Zuma perhaps may have helped us with is that we must be very careful about trimming the powers of a president, even a good one. Make sure that the appointment that they make, whether it's of the head of police, of the NPA, and many others, by the time a certain process is followed, so that the appointment really has the approval of whoever participated in the process.
It's a rough 17 months before the elections. Somehow your movement must clear itself out of the negative connotations of President Jacob Zuma and win back the citizenry in order to remain in power. Come 2019, is the ANC a minority government in power, or do you actually see them getting over the 50% mark?
It will all depend on how Ramaphosa uses this wonderful opportunity he has to restructure the ANC, to reform the ANC, to move away from corruption. I just want to say, when he addresses the NEC today, January 8th, whenever when they issue that statement, he must know that he is addressing it to South Africans. He addresses that to the delegates, but he's speaking to South Africans, because if they see him making some funny arrangements with corrupt people in the name of the ANC, he must know that that's goodbye. You must remember that you are not supposed to confirm what Jacob Zuma said, that the ANC comes first and then the nation. If it does do that, that ANC will not have the site. They won't know where the country is. The
liability is still there. Zuma is still president of the country. Opposition still has a field day with him. They could take votes from the ANC by Zuma just still being the president.
No, absolutely. That is why it is absolutely imperative for the ANC to remove Zuma. In fact, if I was Malema and the DA person, Maimane, I would keep quiet about removing Zuma, because as long as Zuma is state president, that long will the chances of the ANC becoming, winning the 2019 election be dim.
That was Mr. Mavuso Msimang, Chair of Corruption Watch and a lifelong ANC member, not mincing his words as he never does. But that's it for the show this evening. We will be back next Tuesday with a look back at the 106th ANC birthday celebrations.